Coach, thanks for taking the time to join Gaelic Gridrion today. I really appreciate it. I know you're busy. How is life going these days? How is life treating you, with the whole pandemic and everything?
It's good. We're just about ready to start training camp. We had to miss a season because of the pandemic and how it affected Canada, but we're back. The health authorities have given us the all clear. Our protocols are going to be very, very similar to what the NFL went through last year. Some places won't have fans in the stands, some will. The hope is that by the time we get to the second or third week of the season, that they'll start to loosen that, as long as the vaccinations and all that keep going the way they're going. We're excited because we've had, as coaches, taking a year off is unheard of. So everybody's chomping at the bit, and we had our first meetings today, and it was really, really good.
So you're with the Hamilton Tiger Cats at the minute as the
Right.
special teams coordinator. How do you for you? What's the biggest difference between the CFL and the NFL?
Well, I think there are a lot of differences. First of all, you got to start with the playing surface. The CFL field is 110 yards long, not 100. It is 13 and a half yards wider than an NFL field. And the end zones are 20 yards deep, not 10 yards deep. So it's a much bigger playing surface. And because of that and the similarities of the rules, for example, an Irish fan who'd never seen Canadian football,
like myself,
would appreciate it right away, because he would see many similarities to rugby. For example, the kicking game in our game is much more impactful than it is in the NFL. There are more ways to score in the kicking game than any other aspect of the game. You see things like onside kicks. We say onside kicks. In the NFL, they talk onside kick is that last desperation kick at the end of the game to try and recover the ball. In our league, much like rugby, if you kick the ball forward and you're behind the ball when it's kicked on any down, you can go down and recover it and advance again. So it's a really dynamic game. It's much faster than the NFL game. We have a 20-second clock, not a 40-second clock. So fans that watch the game for the first time, particularly European fans and rugby people, they really like our game.
Yeah, it sounds a lot more dynamic than the NFL version of football anyway, and I imagine it moves at a much faster pace.
It moves much faster pace, and we have one less down than they have in the States.
Correct.
So for you come on the field and it's 1st and 10, then it's 2nd and 10, and now you have to make a decision. Do you punt on 3rd down or you try and go for it? So obviously with one less down, you see more passing, you see more aggressive play calling. The game, again, is suited to a little bit of a smaller player. Like, for example, what our strong safeties in the NFL are typically linebackers in Canada. What our defensive ends are defensive tackles in Canada. What our defensive ends are linebackers in the United States.
So it's smaller, faster, quicker players.
Exactly, because of the width of the field. I'll tell you a story. There was a guy who played for the old Washington Redskins, right? What is now the Washington Football Club, named Dexter Manley. And Dexter's a Hall of Fame NFL player. And at the end of his career, he came to Canada because he wanted to continue to play. And Dexter went out in his first game and he rushed the passer twice. And then you see on the tape, he's patting his head. And the tapping your head is the universal sign that I'm tired, get me out of here, right? And the coaches on the sideline are all giving him the stop sign, because in Canada, with a 43-man roster, it was 40 at that time. You don't have a backup for a backup. I mean, these guys got to play almost every down. And so
just got to suck it up.
Yeah. And so when you get an American who comes up here, for example, when the NFL makes its last cuts, it's for September 1, it's typical for a lot of American players who've been cut in that last cut to come up and play in Canada. And invariably, you see the same response when they come up. They think they're ready to play. They think they're in shape. and then all of a sudden they play about a quarter of our game, and they're over on the oxygen tent.
So, Coach, you've had such a wide kind of range of coaching roles. I mean, you've coached in the old NFL Europe, you've coached in college, the pros, CFL currently, and previously. What has been your favorite coaching role, or one that stood out the most to you, and why?
Well, I think the one that probably is that I enjoyed the most, there are two. Obviously, when I worked for Coach June Jones at the University of Hawaii, that was dear to me because that's my home. That's where I consider home. Hawaii is a very special place. When you represent the University of Hawaii, you not only represent, a state, because Hawaii was a kingdom for centuries, and then was taken over by the United States in the early 19th century or 20th century. So you recognize that you represent way more than what you would represent at the University of Pennsylvania. Yeah. So that one was one. And plus I worked with great people there. The second one was spending time with Coach Vermeil and the Kansas City Chiefs in 2001. And that was really special to me because Coach Vermeil has had the biggest influence on my coaching life than anybody has. And to have an opportunity to work with him and, see what he was building at the Chiefs, that was really special.
So have you been surfing in Hawaii recently, or have you had the chance with everything that's going on?
Well, you know what? We didn't have a real big challenge with COVID back home, and there were no masks. There was no restrictions about going to restaurants, going to bars. And because the ocean is such a fundamental part of people's lives there, even when COVID was at its worst, when it first started last year and they didn't know what it was, they never took the beach away from you. They never said you can't go to the ocean, because people in Hawaii, that's part of our culture.
Part of the culture is it's a huge part of the life there, the beach and the water. So yeah. So having coached in NFL Europe and having had the exposure to the old pro league there, what do you kind of make of the new pro league that started up, the European League of Football?
Well, it's interesting. Pat Azuma, who actually is the commissioner or president of that league, was one of our national coaches. He was the national coach in Hamburg, and Patrick played for me as a player, and so I have a real close relationship with him, and I'm really hopeful that goes. I really think that it's a brave step. They've got television right now, at least in Germany, which is key to their success, because the reality of it is even the NFL wouldn't be the NFL if they had to rely on ticket revenue to promote their game. So as long, Jimmy, as they have television coverage, I think they've got a chance.
And they can get the exposure outside of the. I mean, I know myself. I mean, I get the occasional email with the highlights or whatever, but aside from that, I wouldn't really know how to watch it apart from like the live streams they have going. So it's definitely a great exposure stream for them.
Yeah, and I think if you and I consider myself a football purist and a little bit of a football historian, and if you know the
so we're back. My apologies, we're gonna have to do some editing there. The never a dull moment here. So, Coach, you were telling me about Patrick in NFL Europe and how that's going and the kind of the exposure they have via television.
Yeah, I think that, and television is such a critical part of this whole equation. Jimmy, I think about the National Football League, the history of the National Football League, and how it's grown into be this monstrous organization that it is today, really the biggest single pro league in all the world. And it really is traceable directly to television exposure, because up until 60, 61, 62 in there, college football was much, much bigger in the United States than NFL football was. As a matter of fact, when I went to SMU, they told me the story about when the Dallas Cowboys became an expansion team, NFL expansion team. they were having such a hard time getting people to come to their games that they would send girls with tickets to the SMU game on Saturday afternoon, and those people would hand out free tickets to come see the Cowboys on Sunday. Day. Now we can't even comprehend that.
No, because they're America's team, like the most famous NFL brand in the world, the Dallas Cowboys.
And they're going to be featured on Hard Knocks this year, and I mean, they are one of the most valued franchises in the world. Well, it's amazing to think that 50 years ago, nobody would know. I mean, they had to give free tickets away to come see him play. But that's the power of television.
If only it was still free tickets, I mean, you think of the demand now and ticket prices for games is insane. So, kind of NFL Europe, like, do you see the viability of an expansion team of the NFL coming to Europe? Do you think it's worthwhile? Would it be a good idea, or what are your kind of thoughts there?
I really think that, and I thought pre-COVID, when we were all getting together and doing this in 2019 before Christmas.
Yeah.
My projection was that by 2023 we'd have a team in London. Now, that's been derailed or delayed somewhat because of COVID, but I still think that the NFL has a very, very, very keen interest in putting franchises outside of the United States and making it truly a global league. Because as soon as you do that, as soon as you take a team to London or Toronto or Mexico City or any of the cities that we're talking about, now you are truly a global brand.
Do you think it'll be the Jaguars? I mean, there's been so much talk about the Jaguars moving to London on a permanent basis, and every NFL international series in London every year, well, at least pre-COVID, had the Jaguars as the central kind of team, if you will, that they were being sent over. So it's almost as if the NFL is trying to push the Jaguars on Europe a little bit and say, this is your team, start embracing them.
Well, I think what happened, to be honest, is that Mr. Khan and the Jaguars looked at their situation, and the NFL does a great job of, and TV people do a great job of disguising this with their camera work. But you'd have 40,000 people in a 65,000 seat stadium on game day. Well, then they go to Wembley and they've got an 80,000 seat stadium that they sell out in 3 hours. I mean, you be the business guy, right?
Yeah.
So obviously these are all businessmen, and this is a huge industry that they're in. So they're always looking for what the next best deal is. And, I think the public in the UK and in Europe has proven time and time again now
that the demand is there.
Yes, absolutely. Because let me tell you something. I know this from working for the National Football League for 3 or 4 years, that they do not do anything without serious, research, and they're not just going to go willy-nilly or on a whim put a team in London and 3 years later they have to fold it, right?
Yeah.
They don't operate that way. Everything's about creating revenue streams, making sure that we move forward, but we move forward with a plan and with design.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I mean, I'm not a Jaguars fan, so I wouldn't really be fussed either way. I think once you go to a game in the States, a game in London just pales in comparison. This in terms of the energy and the atmosphere. For me, it's just a different beast. Tell me about your coaching philosophy. Like, what is what's important to you as a coach, and what do you try and impart on your players on a daily basis?
Well, I think what you grow into in this business, if you stay in it long enough, is you recognize that obviously the competitiveness of the game, the competitiveness of the sport is an attraction. It's a thrill. It's, it's that adrenaline rush that, you miss when you stop playing. But what you find out is really the game is for the players. The game is for the fans, and the game is for the players. And our role as coaches is to give, and I said this to our guys this morning in a meeting, I can't make you anything. I can't make you a great player. I can help you in the process, but there's some things that have to happen. Number one, you have to be talented enough. Number two, you have to be willing to make the sacrifices that it takes to be a great player. Now, that's an individual thing, because you may be so talented that you don't have to make the sacrifices that I have to make to become a great player, right? Or it could be vice versa. But the reality of it is, if you're honest with your players and you say, this is where we need to go, this is how we need to get there, we map it out, we put a plan together, and then we actively work on the plan day to day. And I've said to them many times, I will give you as much as I have until you tell me, either by your words or your actions, that no, it doesn't matter that much to me, right? It's not really that worth making that sacrifice or doing that thing or working that hard or whatever it is. And so when you take yourself out of the equation, right? It's not me, I'm not playing, they're playing, it's their game, it's not my game, right? It's a much healthier environment that you have with the player. And I learned this from Coach Vermeil, and he had a saying that I thought was really, really good. Before you teach, you must reach. And what he was saying to us as coaches, and that's from his coaching philosophy, his book that he handed to us in training camp. What he was saying is, players, especially today's players, it's more of a relational business than it ever was before. In the past, when I was playing, you just did what you were told because that was your role as a player. Now, players are much more likely to ask questions, to challenge you on things. And if you take your ego out of it and you recognize that that's their right as players, and then once you know them as people, you have a much better opportunity to help them on their path. Right. So again, and he had another one, like these things are so good, and they're so they so relate to other businesses too. But he said, he used to tell us, players don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And if you think about that, that's really, really true in any business. Yeah.
So primarily you see your role as a coach as an empowerer of your players, and as a teacher, as a mentor, as a guide.
Yeah, I really, as a servant, to me, that's enough. And that's not subservient, it's servant, right?
To help them.
My job is to help you, to serve you in this time in your life, this path that you're on. And I think Jimmy, I think it really, really, really transcends football, right? Because what I've seen more and more of in kids every year is there are more and more kids coming to the game now that are from, fractured homes, kids with one parent, kids with no parents, kids with, so many matriarchal families where the mother is the focal point because she's the only one there, right? There's been no male role model in their life other than maybe a coach or a teacher. And so you recognize that those kids have unique sets of challenges and unique sets of needs.
Yeah, absolutely. What would your dream coaching role be? If you could have any coaching role?
I don't know. It's funny you say. It's funny that people ask me that all the time. I'll get questions like, "Well, why didn't you really ever coach? Why didn't you go to the National Football League?" I never thought about that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I laugh, and my standard line is, Mao Zedong had a 5-year plan. I didn't know 5 minutes ahead of what I was doing. But I never, because when I watch my dad, right, and my dad was in pro baseball for 30 years. But Jimmy, when my dad was a high school baseball coach for 25 years, he used to have the saying, big time is where you're at, right? It doesn't matter where you're doing your job. It's how you're doing your job, right? And then I went and played at the University of Maine. I wanted to play at the University of Michigan, but I played at the University of Maine. But it was never, I swear, I would challenge anybody on this. It was never less important to me playing at Maine in front of 25,000 people than it was to the kid playing at Michigan that same Saturday afternoon in front of 105,000 people, right?
Yeah.
And to me, it's like what you do and what I do, very similar, right? You're running your podcast, and I'm sure it's just as important to you as it is to, the Around the NFL Heroes, or, Pro Football Folk Talk, rather, or anybody who's like my podcast, because it's, you want to do a good job with everything that you do.
It's all relevant, I guess.
Yeah.
So I have one last question for you. I can imagine as a CFL coach, you don't get much time off, but when you do, if you're not surfing, what do you do to unwind in your spare time? Will you get some downtime?
You know what? I'm a big outdoor guy. I love to be outdoors. I need air. I need sun. I need the outdoors. And then my other passion, in addition to surfing, is I have a vintage. Okay. I'll go this way. Did you ever see the movie The Great Escape, starring Steve McQueen?
I have.
Okay. Well, the motorcycle that's in that movie, I have a replica commemorative Steve McQueen Triumph Bonneville that looks exactly like the motorcycle in that movie. And that movie I saw when I was probably 10 or 12 years old. And for every guy that was my age, that was like, there was nobody cooler in the world than Steve McQueen, and there was no motorcycle, sharper than that bike. And I just happened to see, they only made 500 of them, and I just happened to see one, and I was fortunate enough to get it. And so I'll take off on my motorcycle and put earbuds in my ear and just go out and ride.
Out in the open road.
Yep.
Fantastic.
That to me, if I'm not surfing, I want to be riding my motorcycle.
Great. Sounds fantastic. Well, listen, Coach, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for taking the time again and to talk with me today. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll catch up soon.
Awesome, Jimmy. And one day we'll get you on our podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I'll return the favor.
All right, brother. Take care.
Thanks, Coach.